Over the last couple of videos that I've made about finances, I've had a lot of very positive comments from people who basically told me that I had helped them maybe finally get a handle on their own finances, or my story resonated with them because they lived exactly the same thing that I lived. But I had a few from people, I would say probably the younger generation, who said that it is impossible to do what I did in today's economy, that my generation has destroyed the lives of younger people, and that they will always live a life of debt, and they will never be able to buy a home, and the list just goes on and on. And I'm not going to argue with the fact that it's worse. I'm not going to argue with the fact that it's harder. But I am going to argue with the fact that it's impossible, because nothing is impossible. So today I'm going to look at, well, actually I'm making two videos. I'm making a video today about 4 major types of debt and the power that $100 has to tackle that debt. And the next video that I'm making right after this will be, how do I find the $100 in my budget when I'm so strapped for cash I can't keep up? There are ways. So this will be a video in 2 parts. Let's get started. Now I've got some figures that I've put on my phone here, and I'm just going to tell you one of the things that I did to research for this. I went to ChatGPT, I went to Perplexity AI, and I asked a series of questions. What is the average interest rate in the United States on a 30-year mortgage in 2025? What is the average that people are spending on a house in 2025? And then I asked it to do some math for me. And so the things that I'm going to tell you come from that research. So let's put that out there up front. I am not a financial guru by any means. And take whatever I'm saying here with a grain of salt. But I want to start this video with we might consider it to be the best possible debt people think about, which is a home mortgage. And we're going to work our way down the list to maybe what I consider to be the worst possible debt. So let's assume that you are an average home buyer in the United States, and you borrow, and I realize some of you never borrowed money for a home. You don't think you can afford a home. I get that. I do. Stay with me. But you borrow $150,000 for a 30-year mortgage, and you're going to get the average interest rate in the United States, which is somewhere between 6 and 7%. It's about 6.5%, okay? Maybe 6.8. And you're going to make those payments for 30 years. Now, nobody lives in a house for 30 years anymore, but we're talking about debt. So you've bought a house, $150,000. You're going to pay a monthly payment at 6.5% for 30 years. And your monthly payment is going to be $948.10. Now, that's before you pay for homeowners insurance, or before you pay for property tax. So this is just the payment on the loan. And at the end of 30 years, on the $150,000 that you borrowed, you will have paid back a little over $340,000. Now, your home price does generally, as a rule, increase over time. But to keep up with inflation and everything else, by the end of 30 years, the $350,000 that you spent may be all your home is worth. So the idea is, how fast can I pay that down? And this is one of the things that it's a theme we'll come back to over these 4 kinds of loans, or these 4 kinds of debt. And that is that in the United States, I'm speaking only for the United States at this point, but we will borrow more or we will borrow longer if it means that our payment is affordable. That is horrible thinking. It's what I lived in for years. So if I could find $100 in my budget, and instead of what did I say, 948.10, instead of 948.10 every month, I added $100 every month. Now, instead of 30 years, my loan is going to be paid off in 23 years and 1 month, 277 months. And I will have saved myself $51,726 in interest just by finding $100. I can save $56,000 over the life of my loan. I would say that's pretty powerful. Now, another kind of loan that's not quite as healthy as a home loan, if you can consider a home loan to be healthy, is a car loan. And the reason that the car loan is a little worse is because the car is only going to depreciate. It never, unless you have a classic that's, 30 years old and in condition, your car is never going to gain any kind of value. It's only going to lose value. And the average length of time that people take out car loans in the United States in 2025 is between 6 and 6.5 years. Now, when I was buying cars years and years ago, the typical loan was 36 months, 3 years. And then they decided if we go to 4 years, that will lower the payment and make the car a little more affordable because the price of the car is going up every year. And we can lock people in because they'll be paying a lower amount every month, but they're going to wind up paying a lot more over time due to interest. So that by the time that I bought my last car in my first marriage, that goes back a long way, we took out a loan for our car at 5 years. And by the time, about 6 months before I paid that car off, it was worthless. If I had gone in to trade it in, I would not have gotten what I owed on the car back. I would have had to have added that to the next car loan to get the next car. So the longer you have a car loan, the lower the payments, but the worse it is down the line because your car may eventually be worth nothing and you still owe money. So to look at that, I went into Perplexity and I said, okay, I'm going to borrow $30,000 for a new car. Now, obviously, if I'm going to borrow money for a car, I'm thinking I got a little money to put down. I'm not buying the most expensive car. Maybe I've got $5,000 in my pocket. I put that down. I financed $30,000 for 5 years. Not the 6, that's the average now, 5 years. And the average interest rate right now on car loans in the United States, average, so depending on where you live, it could be a lot different, is 6.8%. 6.8% for $30,000 over the course of 5 years. And at that rate, at the end of 5 years, I would have paid $35,472.55 for my car. That is probably now worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $5,000, depending on the model. But if I add just $100 a month to that car loan, then I would pay it off in 50 months instead of 60. I pay it off in 4 years instead of 5, and I would save almost $1,000 in interest. Now, that's not a lot, but now my car is paid off earlier where it's still maybe worth something. Most of us don't buy a car and drive it for 15, 20 years. I'm probably looking at doing that with my last car. But that $100 a month saved me 12 months of payments. And that's nothing to sneeze at. Now, the next two, it was kind of a toss-up. What is the worst kind of debt that you can have? And for my next to the worst kind of debt, I decided to go with credit card debt. And so with credit card debt, the average debt in this country for a family that carries a balance, not per family, but for families that carry a balance, the average amount of debt right now is about $7,000. And the average interest rate, if I can find it here, the average interest rate on credit cards is just over 21%. That's highway robbery, any way you look at it. So I went with a little lower number just to make it more manageable. And I went in and I said, I've got $5,000 in credit card debt. Now, when I started paying off my debt years ago, I had $10,000 just on one card. And I had 2 more cards besides that. So 5,000 is, it's small, okay? But I want you to stay with me here. So on $5,000 at 21% interest, my minimum payment is right at $100. And a lot of people today, they're living minimum payment to minimum payment to minimum payment, hoping they can finally pay on their credit card. And they just live that way. You know, if you never added another dollar, if you stopped charging cold turkey today, that $5,000 at the minimum payment would take you 50 years to pay off at the minimum payment. 50 years. Because all you're doing is paying the interest. It's a huge, huge problem. And especially after the housing bust in the early 2000s and after COVID, when a lot of people lost their jobs and they were living month to month, a lot of people started racking up credit card debt because that's the only way they could survive. I get that. I was fortunate in education. We didn't go to work. We worked from home during COVID, but we still got paid. But a lot of people didn't have that luxury. So if I took $100, just $100, and added it to the minimum payment. Now, I've decided not to charge anything else on my card. I'm going to get out of debt. That $5,000 is it. I'm paying the minimum payment of $100. I'm going to add $100 to it. Now I can pay off the card in 46 months. From 50 years to less than 4. Just by paying $100. Now, this is how I did the snowball method with my 3 credit cards. I put an X amount of dollars. I paid the minimum payment on the 2 highest balances I had. I just let them sit there. And I didn't charge anything else. And I paid the minimum payment, and it was either $100 or $150 over the minimum payment for my lowest charged card. Now, let's say the minimum payment was $50, and I paid $100 more than that. So I was paying $150. When I paid off that credit card, I took the whole $150 and paid it on top of the minimum balance or the minimum payment of the next card. And let's say that card minimum payment was also $50. So when I finally got that paid down, I took the $200 I was paying and paid it on top of the minimum payment of the most expensive card. That's the snowball method. We're just talking about one card, $5,000. We went from 50 years to under 4. And I've got it in here somewhere. Let's see. If I paid the minimum balance for 50 years, I would pay on that $5,000 loan, that's basically what it is, a loan, I would pay back $28,263 just in interest. That's why you never run a balance on a credit card, ever. If I paid it off, if I added that $100 to it and paid it off in just under 4 years, now I've only paid $2,077 in interest, and I've just saved myself $26,186 because I found $100 extra in my budget to pay on that debt. This is not impossible. Now, I can hear some of you already saying, I don't have $100. That's the next video. Save your comments. That's the next video. So, let's talk about what I consider to be the worst debt, and that's student loans. Somewhere along the line in education, our leadership lost its way. I'm just going to be honest with you. They lost their way, and they decided that everybody should go to college. And that was the worst thing we could have done to people, because not everybody should go to college. You can make a lot more money in a trade than you can with a college degree, depending on which degree you went for. So why did we do that? Well, we did it because we wanted to loan them the money to go. It's just that simple. We wanted to make a killing on student loans. Now, when I went to college in 1976, to the best of my recollection, a year's tuition, I don't remember if this included housing or not, but a year's tuition at Lee College in Cleveland, Tennessee, it was before it was Lee University, was $2,000 a year, give or take. And my ACT score got me a 50% scholarship, so it cost $1,000 a year. And then, of course, I didn't go to class. I didn't pass very many classes, and I lost my scholarship. And so the second year was a little more than that. But hardly anybody took out loans to go to school in the 70s. If you could afford it, you went. If you couldn't afford it, you did something else. And now we've locked people into these student loans. Now, student loans are designed to be paid off somewhere between 8 to 10 years. That's the design. But what I found in my research is the average time to pay off a student loan is 20 years. Now, why is that? Well, partly because the student loan industry makes it really easy for you to say, I don't want to pay for a little while. I want to miss a payment. Or during COVID, when they said, nobody has to pay your loan. What they didn't tell you was the loan's still there. The interest is still there. They just said, we'll make it where you don't have to pay your payment for a little while. Other things happen. You lose your job, so you apply for a waiver. You don't have to pay your loan for a little bit. Other kinds of things happen along the way, and we're just putting that debt off to where it feels like we can never get out from under it. So let me tell you what a student loan is supposed to look like. I never had one. So you can tell me in the comments if I'm full of crap. The average student loan in 2025 is $39,000. Now, I hear most news stories talking about $100,000, $150,000 in debt, $200,000 in debt. And if you went to Harvard or Yale and you were trying to get a law degree, or you went to medical school to become a neurosurgeon, you're going to have massive amount of debt, just hoping that you can get a job that pays you enough to pay that debt. But for most of the peons like me, who just barely scrape by, and we go to state schools, the average student loan is $39,000. And right now, the average interest rate is 6.39%. Yours might be up or down from there depending on when you took it out. But a loan in 2025, that's sort of the average. And the monthly payment is roughly $530. It varies a few dollars here and there. And again, we're talking about average, okay? Average. So $530, and it takes over 20 years for about 50% of the people who get one. And the rest of them paid it off in 10 years or less. If you completed a graduate or a bachelor's degree, you've probably got about $30,000 in debt. And if you went for a master's degree, of course, that's going to add to that. But if you were to pay your payment every month faithfully, you should expect about 8 years. That's still a long time. But if you add $100 to the payment, just $100, you should be able to pay that off in a little under 6.5 years. And that would save you about $2,200 just in interest. And you get out of debt. And now that $500, $600 you were paying on that after 4 years, you've got that in your pocket now to go do something else with your budget. But the people who are trapped, who have taken every waiver possible, who didn't get a job in the field that they thought they were going to get, who aren't making the money they thought they were going to make, they are trapped in a humongous amount of debt. But even that $100 can help you. The key is you got to find a way to make that payment every month and stop putting off the inevitable. Those are the main 4 kinds of debt, I think, that we need to talk about. And all of them can be diminished faster, easier, and save you a lot of money if we could just find $100. So in the next video, this video is coming out on a Tuesday. The next video will be Thursday. You don't have long to wait. In the next video, we're going to talk about a number of ways that you can pretty easily find $100 in your budget to add to whatever it is you're paying down and get yourself out of debt. I hope you'll stick around. Thanks for watching.